Good day, everybody, and welcome to the third session of the NASTD 101 sessions that we've put together. My name is Brad Steele. I'm the Senior Director of Unified Communications with the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and the 2020 National Association of State Technology Directors President. And Article 1 of the NASTD Constitution, Section 2, has under its purposes and goals. Second goal is, as listed, is engage in programs for the training, education, and development of technology professionals from all areas of state government. Along these lines, we've decided to put together a set of educational videos, sort of 101 sessions to help with this education. We ask industry leaders to get together and our corporate affiliate partners to get together with us. We ask them some standard questions about technologies, about the service in question. If you haven't seen the previous videos that we put together, you can find them on nastd.org. We've done one a month for the last couple of months, and we're going to go quarterly hereafter. But 2 months ago, we did a session on SD-WAN, and last month we did hyperconvergence. So if folks attended the NASTD regional calls, there were several consistent questions across all 4 regions about today's topic. And I will say that when I first heard about Kubernetes, I was thinking that I had to get a gym membership or maybe some mats for the floor here in the house. Wasn't really sure what Kubernetes was. Did a little bit of research on my own, and the topic did come up at each of the regional events. So I thought this would be a good one to dive into this month. So what we have done, we've reached out to D2IQ, one of our corporate affiliate partners, and we have Chris Gaun. I'm hoping I'm pronouncing that right, Chris, the Director of Product Management with D2IQ.
Thanks for having me. It's great. So
I have since found out that Kubernetes isn't that exercise thing that I was supposed to be doing. I'm glad about that. I like exercise. So tell me, what is Kubernetes and what is it used for?
Yeah, it's a good question. Kubernetes is, well, first off, let's talk about the word. It's a weird word, right? Kubernetes, how do you pronounce it? When you see it all spelled out, you're like, where is this coming from? It actually comes from the ancient Greek of the word helmsman, like someone that is steering a boat. So that's where the word comes from. Whether that is a good marketing name for the project or whatnot, no, that's all in the past. It's been around for 60 years, so about 5 years in production or in GA. I've been working on Kubernetes for over 5 years now. And what it is a container management system. It's a set of APIs on how you control, orchestrate, and manage containers. And you can think of a container itself as a packaging of an application. Now, it's not an application that you run on your phone. It's not that type of app, right? It's not an application that you run typically on your desktop. It is these workloads that you run typically in a data center or over many data centers or in the public cloud or in an edge environment, like a factory floor. And what Kubernetes does is, well, the best way to explain it is to kind of look at the history and where it came from. At the dawn of these large cyber web scale companies, they needed to figure out how to scale. We're talking about the Netflixes, the YouTubes, the Twitters of the world, and they each did their own thing and came up with a way to manage the infrastructure in their data centers, like a bunch of hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of servers. So they all came up with ways to do that. And one of the ways that they were doing, especially at Google, was to use these things called containers. So they packaged up their workloads and were able to ship it. And then the orchestration layer that they were using was used because if there was commodity hardware underneath, which means it doesn't have 5 nines of availability, it could go out at any time. We know this story, this like the classic Google Store, you just use commodity hardware, but it could break down. So what happens when it breaks down? The actual workload gets orchestrated to somewhere else. It's dancing around, and that's how we as users of a Google search or Gmail never have service disruption. That's how us as a Netflix user never really see it go out. No matter how many users are using Netflix on a Thanksgiving or Christmas, you still have it working. And so they were all building their own thing. And then we had a move in the industry to sort of systematize that and standardize on it or some way. And so there was a search for that. One way previously, or still in wide use, is Mesos, and that has been used by Uber and a bunch of other companies, Netflix as well. And that was one method. And then a little bit later on, people at Google said, we actually orchestrate containers, billions of containers every day. Why don't we take our internal system, which is very much built specifically for Google, just take the lessons learned, build a new thing, so it's completely new, and sort of open source it, meaning make the code available, and have a community work on it, like different companies, different end users or customers that want to consume Kubernetes. And so that's exactly what they did. They came up with sort of the base of Kubernetes, then donated it to an organization called the CNCF, the Cloud Native Computing Foundation. And from there, there's a whole bunch of vendors, providers that now contribute to Kubernetes. So it's not owned by any single entity or besides the CNCF, it's not owned by any single vendor. And it's widely used now. You see Kubernetes in most organizations. It's very popular within the federal governments and becoming a standard bearer for state governments as well. So that's a very long answer to one short question.
No, that's awesome. And so what are some of the common uses that we would see probably within state government?
So again, you have all these services that you are trying to deliver as a state government. Some are internal to government employees, like systems that you just have that you sometimes haven't updated in 10, 20, let's face it, sometimes 30, 40 years. And so a lot of times, a lot of times, and you see this right now, just to give one particular example, you see this with unemployment systems, right? Where they're getting taxed and they kind of fell down or weren't able to service everyone. And so there is a need within the state government to take those services, whether they're web-based or website that you go to that is servicing your citizens, or something that's used by internal employees, and update them, and also not just update them, but make them more agile for the future, so that and as technology grows, as the needs of citizens grow, now we all have cell phones and whatnot, that you'll be able to quickly enhance and adapt to that changing environment. And Kubernetes allows you to quickly iterate on these services, on these applications that you are hosting in your state.
Okay. And if I'm doing a procurement and putting Kubernetes in place, does it replace or is it supplementing something that's existing in our data centers?
Yeah, there are places that are using it to replace some virtualization or potentially all virtualization. You don't need, so virtualization, if you remember, you have a server and you could split it up into virtual machines, and each one of those virtual machines acts like a virtual server. Containers don't need that. You could actually have multiple containers on a server, and Kubernetes would be the way to orchestrate those. So we have seen, takeouts of virtualization or less virtualization because of Kubernetes, because you could run now multiple applications or multiple things on a single virtual machine. But that's only part of it. Some of it is you know, your ability to move faster, your ability to better service your actual constituents there, wherever you may be. If you are going to do a new project, if you have a new service that you're trying to deliver, a new site, a new mandate that, hey, we need to redo unemployment, as just an example. Potentially one of the things that you want to think about when making that change is actually redoing the infrastructure underneath. And now that cloud is popular, and we have a way to leverage that on the application layer, you probably want to investigate and look at Kubernetes as one of the pieces, as one of the strong things that you want to consider when making that transition. So it's not just about price, it's not just about replacement, it's about what's strategic to you, what's the mandate, and what's the best way to do that. In Kubernetes, in a lot of federal government, you see it as actually a mandate, say in the DoD, of, hey, things need to be working on Kubernetes. We're competing. You don't ever think of that, the DoD competing, but really Cold War, if you think of it that way, there's other people building other stuff, right? Or other countries and whatnot. So, you know, they needed the best technology, and they actually, you know, partly made a mandate that they should use Kubernetes. So same thing in the state government. If you want to better service your citizens, that is something that you should strongly look at.
Excellent. So we've covered the use cases, but is there anything as far as hardware that I need to procure, or is it strictly software or strictly service? How does it work?
Yeah, so it's software typically that you deploy on existing. Some people buy new hardware just because they're doing a refresh, but you deploy it on existing commodity hardware. You don't typically buy something special. You don't buy a hyper-converged thing with 5 nines of high availability. Again, this was built for the use case that things are going to go down, things are going to break, right? That's what Kubernetes is there for, to fix that on the application layer. And so you typically just work with the vendor, work with the provider, and install it on your existing data center machinery.
Okay. And you know, something that we're all very much concerned about in the States, you know, I like to say that here in the Massachusetts, we thought so much about security that we put it in the name of our secretariat. What are the security concerns that we have to think about when we're going to containerization or to Kubernetes? And or is it the opposite? Does it help us get more secure?
Yeah, it couldn't help you get more secure, but you should be partnering with a vendor or provider around the security, because if you try to go and do it yourself, you're going to shoot yourself in the foot. I've seen this so many times over the past 5+ years. Even very sophisticated shops like an Uber have had Bitcoin mining on their Kubernetes cluster. No one wants that. No one wants that headline, right? So there are ways, yeah, there are ways to secure the Kubernetes cluster and to lock it down, to make sure that, you know, there's no unsecure ports, that you're doing the proper scanning of the images and whatnot. It is a deep topic. It is a topic with many chapters. So you do definitely want to have an expert that you can partner with on that front, for sure.
Excellent. I think my second goal, my first goal is like show up for work. The second goal is don't get your name in the newspaper.
Especially with Bitcoin mining.
Unless I win the lottery, then that can be friendly. Yeah. So how does Kubernetes help us with a move to the cloud? I mean, so many of us are moving. So much of our you know, data centers are being consolidated and shifted off to AWS or Azure or the Google Cloud. So how can this help us?
Yeah, one of the great things about Kubernetes is that the API, the way that you run stuff on Kubernetes, is the same no matter where you get it. typically. So if you're getting it from a cloud provider, there's many different options of Kubernetes services out there. But typically, even when you do that, you need a transition period. You need something both in your data center and in the public cloud. And Kubernetes can help with that, again, because it has the API is the same in both places. So you could run stuff in your data center, and it works exactly the same as when you're running stuff in like an AWS EKS. Now, the thing that you need to consider when doing that and having that, hey, this transition period or whatnot, is is there a layer that's going to help with that transition, or going to enable me to manage both the public cloud and my homegrown Kubernetes cluster in my data center. And this is probably the hottest topic in the world of Kubernetes right now. And we have solutions around that called Commander. I've seen many. There's other solutions around that as well. But this is a hot topic in the industry right now.
And how does it help to migrate and modernize workloads?
Yeah, so modernizing workloads, again, typically we were running them in VMs, right? And we kind of had the idea that we'd be able to. I remember like 10 years ago, 2007, way more than 10 years ago, like when VMs were becoming popular, right? The idea was, I could just do it in a VM, and like I could ship it and it should work exactly the same in the data center. This was the idea that developers had. But then it wasn't always the case, right? Actually, it was never the case. So containers, are a way that it does work similar or the same in every environment that you're doing. We don't really have cases where the container worked differently on my laptop than it did when I shipped it and orchestrated it in the data center with Kubernetes. So it enables your developers, your engineers to take the work that they're doing on the code side and package it in a different way that they could deliver it faster, and that they could deliver it with assurances that it will work in the environment that they're shipping it to. So it just gets them the infrastructure faster, gets them so that they could commit code in their application and upgrade their application on a more regular and steady basis. And so that's the goal of modernization. If there's any other goal, it's below that.
Yep. All right. If I'm thinking about moving in this direction, what are the limitations and restrictions that I need to be aware of?
Yeah, limitations or restrictions. Yeah, of course. It's again, this is an area where you definitely have to partner with a vendor, and you might be saying, well, he's at a vendor. Of course, you would say that, but no, I'm saying this as a Kubernetes user for 5+ years. This is not a thing that you want to take on by yourself. This is something where you want to partner with someone with deep expertise on this front. If you remember earlier, I mentioned the Cloud Native Computing Foundation. They're the governing body of Kubernetes. There's also an entire ecosystem of tool around Kubernetes. There's the monitoring, the logging, all this other stuff. So you need to make sure that someone's prepared to deliver not just Kubernetes, but the package as a whole, and that are aware of your unique, especially in state government, your unique requirements around security, around every data center I go into, they have a different way of doing networking. So it seems like you gotta partner with someone that has seen it all, and that's some of the things where I can't list and give you a bullet points of like, hey, look out for these 10 things, because it's going to change from environment to environment. So it's just incredibly important that you actually just partner with an expert there.
Are there any applications or anything within our data centers that wouldn't work on Kubernetes or doesn't play well?
Probably stuff that in the mainframe would not work on Kubernetes, and I'm not sure why you would run Kubernetes on a mainframe, although I've heard that IBM has it. But again, this stuff was designed for commodity hardware. It's meant for hardware to break, right?
Right.
So I wouldn't suggest that that's the first place you go. don't don't try to tackle the mainframes first. Try to tackle your probably Linux-based applications first. That's where you want to go first. There is a Windows worker nodes or Windows server support for Kubernetes, but it's not equivalent to Linux. So I would start with Linux and then move on to Windows later on.
Okay.
There's some things that you need to be aware of when you're doing Windows.
Awesome. So, once I get the notion, I get all the sign-offs, all of the POs go out and everything like that. How long should I plan on taking to implement, my first workload, and then down the road to get into full production?
Yeah, for full production. So full production is gonna, obviously take more than a day. You could get your first Kubernetes cluster to start playing with in hours, to be honest. You could get it on your laptop. You could get it on a Raspberry Pi if you just want to play around with it in a lab.
Okay.
So you could get Kubernetes up and running fairly easy, right? You could even go to a cloud provider and just press a button, right? Yep. You need to then sort of develop the expertise. And again, the CNCF, one of the reasons that they are important is that they have these certifications around Kubernetes, and they also certify vendors and distributions as well. So they say, oh yeah, this is compliant with upstream, and this vendor or this provider has gone through and have enough people within their organization to have certified trainings, have certified services, have a certified distribution. So again, I would start you could start playing with it right away, implementing them right away, then go partner with someone to get it into production. Oftentimes the biggest roadblocks have nothing to do with technology. It has to do with organizational structure. It has to do with, this is a new way of doing things. It has to do with training everybody on containers, Kubernetes, and everything everything in this ecosystem. And so that's the long pole, if I'm going to be honest. It's mostly how your organization is set up. And so if you're dedicated, if you're saying, hey, we're going to do this, and we're going to march forward because I want to better service my customers or citizens or internal users, then I've seen organizations move very quickly, a matter of months to production, a couple of months, 3 months. If there's a lot of hand wringing and a lot of costly Zoom meetings, then it might take a whole lot longer.
Yeah. So next to security, our next biggest question, and for some people it's actually the first question, how does the cost structure work? How do we pay for Kubernetes?
Yeah, so there's typically a free tier that you can go and for trialing and testing it out. So don't go buy on day one. Go test it out. Go work with someone. Download it. Get it set up so that you could start using it and get familiar with it. Get comfortable with it, and then different vendors, different providers have different pricing structure. On our side, and this is very typical in the industry, it's price per core. And I won't go into the exact price of the core, but you see it. Again, you wouldn't see 22,000 different Kubernetes users across the United States if it was something that didn't have a low bar to get started, and if it cost $1 million in order to do that.
So it's a per core price. So it's easy to put a price point on as you move forward.
You get a few cores, start out, and then as you consume, as you put more stuff on the platform, you just grow. Yeah.
And I'm assuming then that doing the cleanup, doing the necessary removal when things go away is critical, so that you're not getting billed for unused.
Yep. Yeah. So make sure that that they have auto scaling. like
Awesome.
like we do. Yeah.
So my last question is open-ended, and I do this on purpose because I put together these questions not knowing a lot about the subject. So tell me, what else do I need to know? What have I forgotten?
Oh, there's a lot.
Yeah, I know. What I don't know could fill a room. I'm telling you.
Yeah. There's a lot. There's many books on this topic on Kubernetes and the surrounding ecosystem. There's you could go into depth on the security, on containers, on logging and monitoring of the Kubernetes cluster. I'd say the fundamental thing that you need to know is it's easy to get started. You could just go and look at what do I have in my data center, what's dusty, what can be modernized, what's my strategic direction here. Do I just want to move to cloud and lift and shift something and take the VMware cost here and shift it into an AWS cost there? Is that all I'm doing? Or do I want to modernize my applications as I'm doing that? Do I want to take that sort of up level what I did in the past and make it run so that it could actually use that really cool cloud infrastructure with the scaling and whatnot? That's why we call it cloud native application. And so I would say that, get started, very easy to do, and then go find a partner and look at what you want to do as a strategy, and then just tackle that small use case and go forward from there.
Excellent. And you were nice enough to send over a glossary of terms, which I'll be putting a link to along with this. I read through it, and it was pretty amazing. So thank you for that. Is there any other reference material that people could look at? You mentioned the organization. Do they have a website that we could go to find out more?
Yeah, our website is D, like the letter, 2, like the number, and IQ, again, like 2 letters, like IQ, like intelligence. It stands for Day 2 Intelligence, basically. So d2iq.com. And then you could find me on LinkedIn, Chris Gaun, Gaun. You can find me on Twitter, which is Kubernetes. Basically, you replace the cube, put it in Gaun. Yeah, and I'd love to hear from everybody that's listening to this. I love to hear, user stories or people that are interested in Kubernetes.
Excellent, and we'll have to get you on NASTD as a contact on there as well. So we'll work on that.
Yeah.
This has been extremely helpful to me, and I hope to the rest of the listeners. I'm waiting for Darth Vader to turn around and tell me to be quiet, but that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Must have behaved. I'd like to thank you again. Again, this is Chris Gaun, and he is the Director of Product Management for D2iQ. I also wanted to thank Christina Angeloni from D2iQ. She's the state and local account executive. She set this up. She's actually hosting this meeting. And it's a great use of our corporate community and our partners to get this education out. And this is the type of sharing and collaboration that NASTD is known for and wants to continue. So I thank you and Christina for putting this together. And I look forward to hearing lots of good things about this session. So thank you.